Inclusive teaching, supporting all students in the college classroom. Recognizing microaggressions.
One of the questions I oftentimes ask or get asked from instructors is that when a microaggression occurs, how do I recognize it? And if I recognize it, what do I do about it? This is a power of microaggressions, and I oftentimes say to them that the issue is making the invisible visible. Microaggressions on the surface appear to oftentimes be a compliment. For example, being told constantly that I speak good English appears on the surface to be a compliment. Now, the perpetrator is unaware of it. And so one of the things that instructors need to begin to do is to understand, to make the invisible visible, to understand what microaggressions are. And that is very difficult for them when they don't have lived experience and lived reality. I tell instructors oftentimes that you can go to a textbook and read about microaggressions. You can attend workshops. But learning about the implicit biases is more than an intellectual exercise. It is an experiential exercise. And as long as the instructor does not have intimate contact with people who differ from them in terms of race, culture, ethnicity, they will fail to understand the worldview of people who differ from them. All of my work in terms of identifying racial, gender, sexual orientation microaggressions comes from what I call, if we talk about racial microaggressions, a clash of racial realities. The racial reality of white Americans is different from the racial reality of people of color. And so you oftentimes ask whose racial reality is the correct reality. Well, social psychologists have answers to that. The groups that are most disempowered are the groups that have the most accurate perception of racial reality. And it makes common sense to me that if you really want to understand racism, do you ask white people or people of color? If you want to understand sexism, do you ask men or women? And if you really want to understand the worldview of LGBTQ individuals, do you ask gays or straights? The answer to me is quite obvious here. So what professors need to do is not simply learn a bag of tricks in dealing with microaggressions, but serious soul searching and education and training. And that's one of the things that I advocate also, that instructors need to go through training to begin to understand what microaggressions are, because it deals intimately with something that they possess and oftentimes find very threatening to look at, which is indeed their biases and assumptions about human behavior.
Microaggressions in an international context.
One of the things that people oftentimes ask me is that the relevance of the studies that we've been doing on microaggressions in an international context. And I can honestly say that although there may be a difference in how people perceive race in different parts of the country, the issue of microaggressions seems to be universal, except the principles of microaggressions occur equally in terms of the psychological manifestation, dynamics, and impact. The themes differ, however. One of the things that we noted, for example, is that even within the United States, microaggression themes against African Americans are different from themes against Asian Americans, against Latinx Americans, and against LGBTQ individuals. The concept of a meta-communication and a put down that is implicit or outside the level of awareness is the same, but the themes differ considerably. The themes that most often Asian Americans encounter are themes of a perpetual alien. For African Americans, it's a theme of criminality. For, even for LGBTQ individuals, there's themes of, sinfulness. For women, there's themes of sexual objectification. Internationally, there are various themes. In fact, I've worked with UNESCO in their teaching Respect for All, in which they implemented the microaggression content in terms of the pilot schools in 4 different countries of microaggressions that were going on. And they were able to acknowledge the fact that race and racism is perceived differently in the United States as opposed to in different countries. The thing that makes it so much different in the United States is that we have one master narrative. We are a nation of equality. Racism is awful. Bias and prejudice is awful. And that conflicts with our belief in terms of that we, however, are told or taught a different message, that some people are better than others. And it's when these come together, we get real upset about that particular matter or issue. But what I would say is that the issue of oppression, discrimination, prejudice, stereotyping is similar in other countries as well. Remember, microaggressions are not simply limited to a racial group. Almost any marginalized group can be objects of microaggressions. Women, people living in poverty, people with disabilities, people with different religious affiliations. And what we find is that internationally, those dimensions occur in terms of microaggressions.